Someday I'll find a printer that prints it pre-rolled. That would be a great convenience. Shana Tova. I have to ask you, what are you doing here? I'm surprised to see you. Waiting out the storm. I think a few other people decided to wait it out with the virtue of the live stream, for which, if you're out there, please, that is absolutely understandable. But 20 years ago, I was told you wouldn't be here. 20 years ago, I was a rabbinic student, and we were having one of our many deep and philosophical discussions, at least as deep as you might imagine, among a bunch of novice rabbi students. And one of my colleagues said that he predicted that within 20 years, there would be no non-Orthodox Judaism. Yeah, he was a rabbi student. I mean, I don't know what he expected to do with his smicha in 20 years' time, because he was basically predicting himself out of a job. But he believed that there would be no non-Orthodox Jews anywhere in 20 years' time. You're wrong. We have right here, every Shabbat, we have Jews around the country, around the world, that are non-Orthodox. And despite what you may have heard, the reports of our death are greatly exaggerated. Would I like more? Of course I would like more. But non-Orthodox Judaism is alive and strong and continues to be the majority of active Jews around the world, and most especially in the United States. But I don't want to be too hard on my colleague, because there is some empirical evidence that lends itself to what he thought might happen. He didn't actually have access to this because the research came out after we had already been ordained, but intuitively perhaps he understood. They did research of the great commune movements of the 19th century. I know, everybody's favorite topic for bedtime reading. Of all of the hundreds and hundreds of communes that were founded during the 1800s, and there were a lot of them in this country, which ones lasted the longest? It's an actually fascinating question to see whether there was any commonality between those that lasted longer. Were the ones that were secular-based able to outlast religious-based? Were those that were built around what we would call radical equality, where everything was shared and held in common? Were they able to last longer than those that still allowed more private property and possession? Were those that asked great demands of the members of the commune, both for entry as well as maintaining their place within it, able to outlast those that asked very little, a low bar for entry, and asking very little during the participation? At the risk of getting it wrong, is anybody brave enough to put their own hypothesis forward of what you think the results might have indicated? The stricter, the religious.
The ones that had a common theme, like everybody wanted to be the same religion or the same.
Well, all communes had a common theme. It was just which theme were they picking from? Were they picking an economic theme? Were they picking a religious theme? Religious. And you're both right, but for slightly different reasons. So religious, it's a bit like what they say in AA. As long as the commune had a higher power in mind, it did pretty well. There had to be some transcendent personification that they were under. Now, in the religious communes, that was easy. Whatever version of God they were portraying would work. But you might be surprised to know some religious communes did not hammer the Godhead quite so hard. That they were not ringing that bell of, there is God watching you, at every commune activity. And those did worse in terms of longevity. The communes that actually said, there is a power. If it wasn't God, it might be nature. If it wasn't nature, it might be the intellect. There is some power that is constantly watching and in your life and supervising our commune activities. That was a big plus towards the predicted longevity of the commune. And the idea was that this built a sense of trust. that if I was part of the commune and you were part of the commune and both of us felt beholden to this higher power, and we were constantly being reminded of that higher power as the ultimate arbiter of the fairness of the commune, then I would be willing to trust you as another member of the commune and see you as being my brother, my sister, my comrade, whatever term was in fashion in that commune, and bound together under this supervisory agent. So, plus for having a strong God. Strictness. Why would strictness, which it did, make communes last longer? I mean, think about it from outside, just as a casual observer. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? The more I demand of you, the more you want to pull away. If I told you that we were going to triple our dues at Temple Israel and have mandatory temple attendance, and that anybody who didn't come would be banished from the community, most of you would probably take that deal and walk out the door. But communes are special. Communes are special. It's not just a regular group of people. It is people who have decided that they are going to literally uproot themselves from wherever they are living, leave behind whatever pattern of life they are currently embracing, and often move quite far, especially during the 19th century when there was a lot of cheap dirt available thanks to disease and murder, and settle in these places and create it in their image. And it turns out that strictness was perhaps the biggest indicator of which communes would last longer. If the commune said, hey, we just want to have a nice commune where people are nice to each other and we hang out and we'll sing some songs, people would go, they would love it, they'd have the s'mores, and eventually they'd drift away. Those communes did not have much staying power. But if the commune said, we want you to sell all of your property, break off all contact with any members of the family who are not part of the commune system, move 1,000 miles away, wear this gray formless sack as your only form of clothing, eat this gray gruel as your only form of food, and continue to spend 5 or 6 hours in prayer and study according to the dictates of our tradition, bam! Those people were still there 50 years later. A little thinner, but still there 50 years later. How does strictness translate into longevity when for most everything else in life we tend to pull against any leash that is put around our throat? And that's not just Americans, by the way. That is a fairly common human characteristic. Any theories? Comfort. So the strictness, especially a strictness that would dominate the entire daily schedule of someone, was incredibly enveloping. You might think smothering, others might think comforting. If I knew that at every single moment of my day, whether I went left or whether I went right, whether I sat down, whether I stood up, was perfectly choreographed by this higher power, that was incredibly comforting. In fact, it took away all of those nagging doubts and uncertainties. You know, each day you wake up and you think, what am I supposed to do with myself today? What is important to me today? Am I going to be able to do what's important? If I spend my whole day and I work and work and then I get to my bed at night and I sit and I think, did I do enough? Did I do what was right? Did I do everything that was needed of me? That is exhausting. But in these communes that were very, very strict, you knew you had done everything you were supposed to do, because they had told you everything you were supposed to do from the moment you woke up till the moment you went to sleep, and if you did it, you had done it. It is incredibly liberating to have your freedom taken away. It is incredibly liberating to have your freedom taken away. Because freedom is exhausting. Freedom means you have to think and choose and do things and then wrestle with doubt, because maybe the free choice that you made was the wrong choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. Or maybe it doesn't seem so bad today, but you worry that 5 years down the line, did we really buy the right house in the right place? Did we pay enough? Is this really going to work? Is the job that I took in the other side of the country really going to be where we'll be happy and comfortable? Maybe I shouldn't have made that job. Maybe I shouldn't have married this person. Should we have had that last kid? Should we have not have had that last kid? It's terrifying to be a free individual. There are constant questions that you have to answer, and most of them don't have solid answers upon which you can rest your feet and feel assured that you have done what is right. It takes remarkable courage to be free. Much more courage to be free than to be a slave. Much more courage than to hand over your freedom to someone else. And these communes that had that level of stricture, they thrived because the people who handed it over found comfort. They were a unique, self-choosing group, of course, but they found that comfort, being free from freedom. But there are other reasons. The sunk cost fallacy cannot be underestimated in this. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the sunk cost fallacy, think of somebody sitting at a slot machine, and they've already put $100 into the machine, and they know that if they just put in another dollar, this one's going to pay off. And they don't get up, because how can they leave behind the $100 they've lost? Right? It would be ludicrous to pull out now when they've already invested so much in trying to get the payout. And time again, not just at slot machines, but at many points in our life, we all fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy of thinking, well, if I've come this far, I might as well keep going. If I've invested this much in this relationship, this job, this path, I better keep going. Because if I pull out now, it means everything that I've already put in was wasted. And we don't want to admit that we wasted it. By the way, you didn't waste anything. You learned a valuable lesson. Don't play slot machines. And it may have cost $100 for you to learn that lesson, but you learned the lesson if you walk away at that point and you say, boy, was I a sucker, and I won't do that next time. But we all fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy, and the high threshold communes recognize this. Make someone burn their bridges, liquidate their assets in the other town, sign everything over to whoever the guru is, and boy, you have sunk a lot into that experience. And boy, are you going to be reluctant to walk out those gates. Because I've put too much into this to turn my back on it. And I would feel such a fool to turn my back on it after having put so much into it. So this too is very manipulative. So you can see why my colleague might have thought that non-Orthodox Judaism might be on the way out. After all, do we make huge, immense demands of our members? Do we have litmus tests for our congregants? You've got to be Jewish. Okay, that's kind of, yeah. Why else would you be coming to join a synagogue? Of course, if you're not Jewish yet, we can help you with that. And we are willing to accept people who wish to convert. But we do so according to traditional Jewish practice, which is not a really high bar. You don't have to be super Jew to either be a member or to become Jewish in the first place. So no, not much of a stricture. We don't have outrageously high dues. I know that may not feel that way sometimes, but first of all, our temple is one of the best I have ever had the pleasure of being party to in helping those who cannot meet the normal due structure find a way to still be able to contribute from themselves and whatever they do have to be part of our community, and we always find a way to make that work. But secondly, from all the research that is done, the amount that people give in dues is very comparable on average to the amount that people give belonging to any religious institution that might work off just normal donations. I know it might have a different psychological feel to put some dollars in the plate that goes round versus to put some money through the due structure. But the math from all of the research, and yes, people do research on these topics, shows that the amount that is raised per capita, per congregation, does not seem to be heavily different between those that just ask for donations and those that ask for dues. Of course, we ask for both. Keep that in mind by the time we get to our Yom Kippur appeal. Do I come around and kick down the door, demanding to inspect your pantry, your refrigerator, your kitchen? Do I ask for a detailed analysis of your Shabbat observance? I can't ask you to take notes on Shabbat, so I'd have to come up with some other way of doing it to make sure that you are following Judaism as the conservative movement teaches? Do I question each and every one of you of why you have not attended a Torah class, a Mishnah class, or any of the other educational opportunities from our congregation? Do I ring you all up and harangue you if you didn't attend a social event or a men's club or sisterhoods activity? No. We don't work in this congregation off of shame and humiliation. We don't work in this congregation out of browbeating. We don't have enforcers. We've got Gabayim, but I've never had to sick Bob Kaplan or Bernie Kahn on anyone to try and hurt them. The occasional talit lasso we might have of putting a talit upon someone on the bima that came up for an aliyah without one. But that's about as rough as it gets in our congregation. So why are we still here? All of the data says that, yeah, non-Orthodox Judaism probably should disappear because we're not demanding enough. We haven't forced you to sink too many costs into this so that you're reluctant to leave. We are not built around shame and humiliation. And thus, if you walk out the door or fail to participate according to the stated goals of the congregation, you can still walk in with your head held high and be welcomed as a member of the congregation. We should be blowing it. We shouldn't be here. So why are we here? How are we breaking this trend, this pattern? We are going against the data. And as a former recovering political science major, that makes me very uncomfortable. The data is supposed to be true, but the data doesn't say the whole picture. First of all, the data doesn't say the whole picture because I believe that many of you do find your Judaism to be demanding. Not too demanding and ridiculous. You're not eating gruel in a gray, shapeless sack. But you do find that your Judaism asks of you to behave in your life. And in many ways, non-Orthodox Judaism makes greater demands of you than Orthodox Judaism. I know, I can't be right. The Orthodox are constantly inventing new restrictions. How can we ever keep up? Because it's not about the number of restrictions or the type of restrictions, it is about the difficulty in being able to live with the restrictions that are already there. When you are living within an Orthodox bubble, it's easy. I can speak from experience from different times I have stayed in Orthodox communities. It is easy to be Jewish. Pesach, when I was in Israel, was a piece of cake, pardon the expression. Pesach, when I was in Japan, that was avodah. That was labor and work, if not outright extortion. Trying to find a way to even get matzah into the country. That took effort. When we live within the world around us, the contemporary world, the modern world around us, and we constantly come into face-to-face contact with people proselytizing other faiths, with people advocating policies, ideologies that are antithetical to Jewish beliefs, of staring at a menu of choices, whether it be from life or a literal menu, and knowing that we're not going to be able to get the wonderful lobster, but instead we're going to have to settle for a salad or something else. That is where you are living up to the demands. And that is much, much harder. It is easy to be a celibate monk if you live on a mountaintop. It is much harder if you are walking around a beach with people offering their intimacy casually. And not to say that the modern world is entirely like that, but it would be very easy to stop being Jewish in the world around us. And it would be very easy to stop being Jewish just by walking out these doors and only being Jewish in this building. And yet I know, especially with this group, the second day attendees, but really from all of our congregants, that that's not the way you live. That you are always in a constant state of wrestling with your Judaism and the world around you, as you should be. We are Yisrael. We are the ones who wrestle. And that only happens when you actually step into the ring. Communes were an interesting idea, and still are, for maybe a weekend retreat. But the real difficulty of life, the real measure of a person's strength of conviction, is not how much are they willing to sacrifice to run away from the choices that will present themselves day after day. The real strength in life is how well you are willing to look at those choices, stand up to them, and again and again and again make the right choice. That is our spiritual strength. And I believe that as non-Orthodox Jews who live within the full range of the world around us and who are engaged in every possible practice and action and profession and community, group, and civic engagement that is possible to imagine, we are constantly being buffeted, demanded of, assaulted, and attacked by things that we have to withstand. Day in, day out, it is still tough to be a Jew. And thank God it is, because that means the world still needs us. Not just Temple Israel, but it still needs Jews. The world still needs us to stand out there and to be the voice of justice, to be the voice of freedom, of equality, of speaking truth to power, of continuing the words of the prophets, of continuing the work of our sages over the last thousands of years, of continuing the tireless work of the rank-and-file Jews who said no to the stupidity of the world every time the world was being stupid, and that was often. That is our strength. That is what binds us together, and that is why we are not going anywhere. Because we have the strength to fight that fight. And we have each other when we need a little reminder that we are in a fight. And our allies are countless, like the stars of the sky, just as God promised to Abraham. We are able to do this. Pat yourself on the back. Look with pride at the people around you. Feel the strength of our community. This is an amazing accomplishment. We should not be here, and yet we are. Yasher koach. Shana tova.